Hello, good afternoon, everyone. So today we have another session of Violin Clinic. Let me just fix this camera a little bit. There. I'm gonna stand up. Get this away. And hello, 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 hello. There. No more feedback. Okay. So again, before we go to the topic, to our main lesson, of course, I will have to demonstrate the basics of violin playing, posture-wise. So first of all, you have to make sure that the top of the bow is the right one for you. If you try to press it with the fingernail or the thumbnail, a press should not let the hair strands touch the stick of the bow. So if you apply further force, that's when it will touch the bow. If it's too tight, you will be having troubles also because it will jump off of the string. So there, proper way of holding the bow. Again, just drop the fingers down and hold the bow. Fingers should not be stretched out too far apart from each other, even closer together. And the thumb's joint should stick outwards, it should protrude outwards. This one not going the other way, like this. There. And of course, the wrist should always be very flexible, very open. There. Then violin again should be parallel to the ground or to the floor. The toes and the scroll, your nose and your gaze should point to this direction, to your left. There. And when you hold the violin, the left shoulder should not lift up. Don't lift it up. So drop down the weight on both the shoulders. There. So if you don't have a shoulder rest, again, all you need to do is clip it there and then push the violin to your left, going backwards there. Now it's also parallel to the ground. So you can actually practice without the shoulder rest. But of course it's comfier whenever you practice with the shoulder rest on the violin. So, yeah. So, again, when you cross from one string to another, the elbow moves down and up. From the E string, the elbow should be almost touching, it should almost touch your waistline. And then A string, slightly upward, going up, or D string and G string, almost shoulder level, but then it's about 1 or 2 degrees lower still. And also, the wrist should always be higher a few degrees compared to the elbow. The height of the elbow should always be a bit lower, 1, 2 degrees lower compared to here, the wrist. Like that. And then you need to relax. And again, you practice the downs and ups or just the flicking of the bow. So touch here and then there. So from the frog to the tip. Because this exercise is effective in loosening your bowing arm, the right arm. Okay, so if you've been practicing that, I also told you in the past session that you can do the flying staccato, slow practice though. This is really to discipline your right arm. As it gets easier, you can start to speed up. And so on and so forth. So depends on how loose your arm has become, then you can actually go faster, even faster than what I just did. So today the lesson is about sight reading. So in sight reading, first of all, you should be really equipped with the techniques. Um, yeah, so I told you to, well, I've been asking you to do self-check exercises because all the bowing variations there will be needed when you want to be good at sight reading. Also, when your fingers are agile, when they can easily move from one position to another and between intervals, then you can easily sight read. Another point is that if you memorize all the positions of the notes, um, regardless of their note values, then you would also get the sight reading much faster. Also, when you can sing the notes, then you can play that. So my former teacher, well, I had two teachers back in college. No, after college, I had another one, and he was because he passed on, and one of the international violinists, and he told me that you can only play tunes which you can sing, or at least your brain can sing. Therefore, if you know the tune, that means that your brain is telling you how high, how low, how loud, how soft, how scratchy you want it, if you want to scratch, or how smooth you want it. So everything. If you can actually sing it, then you can also play on the violin. If you cannot, then for sure, he told me that you will never be able to play it as you want it, or as you heard it. So in front of me is my book there. So one exercise that you also need to focus on, aside from the agility of fingers and the bowing techniques, actually the syncopated rhythms, the syncopes. So what are syncopes? Syncopes are those accents which fall onto normally to the weaker beats or the weaker part of the sentence, as we call the phrases of the music. If they fall onto this time instead of the weak part, the weak point, then they fall onto a strong beat. So one example is if we're doing the longer tones normally fall onto the strong beats. That is very regular. Now, if you want to make it, if you want to turn it into syncope, why don't we add a short note value onto the downbeat before going to this? So if there's an eighth note before that, it becomes a syncope. So it is important that you know or you can feel the rhythm when you're playing. So that will complete the requirement or the puzzle when you want to read or sight read music. So, so number one, you have to train your fingers to be agile. So you should be able to move from one position to another. This is a more advanced technique now, intermediate, I would say. And then your brain should be fast enough to determine if the notes you're playing are in tune or not. That means that you should have acquired the technique, how to tune the notes as fast as you can. So it should be a split of a second. You can already tell if the note you play is actually in tune or not. And then another factor is, well, the rhythm again. You should understand, or it should be natural for your second nature that when you see a half note, regardless of the speed, of the marked tempo, of the metronomic tempo indicated in the music, you should be able to tell right away how fast the value of the note should be. So if there's a piece, let's just say, for example, it says Allegro and then the tempo is 120 beats per minute, you should be able to internalize the rhythm right away. A quarter note should be like this fast, and then the half note will be like that. So the speed it's actually relative. So once you're playing, of course, once you're playing for a performance or in an actual setting, well, it's not an exercise anymore, then you're going to turn off your metronome. So what happens is that your internal rhythm should kick in, well, instantly. So if you're playing with a group or with someone else, once the speed is given, your body should act as the metronome for yourself right away. So, for example, a conductor. If the conductor tells you that the speed is like this, 1, 2, 3, 4, the initial tempo that he gives to you, you should be able to retain that speed and then put it there in your brain. So it should continue. So if he gives you 1, 2, 3, 4, continue counting. Your brain should be counting for you. You don't have to count aloud, but the brain should continue to count. So 1, 2, 3, 4, then your brain saying, continue. And that's the basic rule. First, you need to internalize the speed. Or if you're playing with a pianist or a guitarist, if whoever is giving the tempo should be able to keep the speed, the internal speed. So if the pianist would say, this is our speed, 1, 2, 3, 4, keep that in mind, or the other way around. If they're the one giving the speed, well, of course, you'll have to keep the speed that they're giving to them. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, so that all the note values will be according to the speed that you gave or the speed that was given to you. So another thing here about the after the syncope, there's also Well, you have to know the change of mode. It's important that you know a little bit of theory at least, so that when you're playing something that changes from one mode to another, you can apply the right mood for it. So mode is different from mood. So what I mean about modes are the major and the minor modes. So if a piece asks you to start in a major mode, well, generally the the mood that you will give is a little bit on the lighter side or the happier side. But then the moment you switch to the minor mode, of course, you will have to change the mood a little bit as well. But again, it all depends on the piece that you're playing because sometimes the mood is indicated there. There are minor modes that tell you to play sweetly, something like that, or dolce. Dolce, yeah, that's Spanish and Italian, I would say. So those foreign words that you found at the beginning, that you can find at the beginning of the piece. So it will define how you should play the music. Sometimes, even if it's in the major mode, you will be asked to play it in a melancholic way, or in a more mournful or very sad way of playing, or that kind of mood. So, so about the change of mood, you uh, should be aware that not all music are only built or composed into one mode. And then there's this very important lesson here about the solfege. So solfege or solfeggio is really internalizing or intoning the tones. It means you'll have to sing the notes according to their pitches, to the note values, rhythm, um, well, of course, tempo, and all the other nuances. So solfege is one of the most difficult subjects in the conservatory if you're not really equipped with the basics. So if you cannot read the music well, how will you be able to um, practice solfege? Well, the one thing you can do is actually to write down individual notes into a staff. So you can create a flashcard or set of flashcards wherein you could write you can write a note, just whole notes. You can write them on the different lines and spaces of the staff and both letter lines below and above. So I would suggest that you create flashcards. All you need to do is write how many notes? 7, 14, 15, 16, 7, about 17 notes from the low G up to the two lighter line C. So there. So staff, two lighter lines, the note below is G. And then above the staff, two lighter lines right there, because this is the extension of your pinky finger in first position. That's the high C. So just write them individually into a piece of cardboard, and then create a set of flashcards. And this actually you can do this with other students or those who want to learn how to read music um, with a range of the violin instrument. So you can look for a pair online if he or she is also willing to create flashcards. So what you can do is create one and then show it to him, and then at the same time you can also, on your end, you can also show your flashcards. So it will be like a competition. So You can time how fast one could answer, or let's say, given 15 seconds, how many flashcards one could answer. So, for example, uh, set the timer 15 seconds, and then when you say go, then hold up the flashcard, and of course, the other hand should be able to answer that right away or name the note that's there. So it depends. So you pick at random, of course. It doesn't have to be according to the scale, like G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, not like that. So you need to shuffle the cards. And then, yeah, you can do it should take turns, or maybe just your feeling opponent with your pair, the other side, the other end of the web, and then wait for your turn also. So there are so many ways, exciting ways on how to read and remember the placement of the notes in the staff. Um, well, I did that for a few of my students, actually the kids, the toddlers. So they really like that when you write them into flashcards and then show them, and then you can actually give it to their parents or their guardians so that they can help their kids or their children. So that's one way to do it. And then another thing is, yeah, you should practice a lot of slurring when you're sight reading. Why? Because when you are given a piece, there are always slurs, because those are the phrasings of the piece according to the composer, or sometimes, of course, the editors too. So if your bowing arm, if your right arm is not really equipped with the technique, that is going to hinder you from moving forward. Because once it gets difficult for you to do the not so easy bowing technique that is on the music sheet, then you would stop. Then everything stops there. So one thing that you should remember is to make sure that it's equipped with the different bowing variations. That's why subject number 11 is very important for you, especially if you're just beginning to play the instrument. And then another thing also is the muscle memory for the left hand. Your fingers should know where to go without looking at them when you're sight reading. That means you have practiced enough for them to know where to go even when they're crossing strings. So from E to G and all, this should become a muscle memory. You should not be looking at your fingers while trying to sight read. That will be very difficult. So, but one exercise I did, or yeah, one solution you can do actually is to put the music right where the scroll is pointed at. Just don't cover the notes. So if the music is here, okay, where the scroll is pointing at. When you're just starting to sight read. In that way, the scroll is pointing to the music you're actually playing. You can see everything. You can see your fingers, you can read the notes, and you can also be on guard with your posture. But in a real setting for sight reading, normally you should not look at your fingers at all. Why? There are so many nuances when you're sight reading a piece. There are the dynamic markings, there are the bowing markings, there are the fingerings, all, and even the mood. And of course, you will have to listen very well, because when sight reading, you're also intoning all the notes at the same time. So if you left one behind, then it's not going to be effective. Another thing, if your eyes were too slow to read the music, to process the music that you've just read, when I say music, well, of course, not just the notes, everything that's there, and to the staff, everything that's there, you should be able to process right away. Your brain should be able to process right away. In a split second, you should already know how to execute the whole measure. That's why while playing on the, let's say, first measure, you actually be reading the second measure already. Better if you've already read the whole line. So just before starting to play, you should scan the music from top to bottom. So from the beginning to end. So just scan it. You should be able to tell right away where the difficult spots would be. Sometimes there are more than one. Well, not really sometimes. Most of the time it will be more than one spot. And also, before you even begin to start playing, you have to intone the first note already. You should know the mode. Is it in major? Is it in minor? What key? And then what speed? When it is allegro, then there's no tempo marking aside from this allegro. Then you yourself should decide how you will play it as Allegro. So it doesn't mean that Allegro is really fast and fast. It just have to be a little bit on the livelier side, so you can actually play it a little bit slower. It could be in a moderate speed, but then with livelier mood. So those are very important when you're just sight reading music. It is advisable also that for you to just pick any piece you want to read. Even if you're a violinist, you can actually pick other instruments, music pieces, or music sheets that will help you to really master how to sight read. So just pick there maybe a piano piece, an easy one. So just put it in front of you and try to play it on the violin. Well, of course, the G clef. Or you may try to play the viola, but of course you should know how to read the sheet for the viola because it uses a different clef. It's an alto clef, so 5 notes lower. And you can also try doing it because in solfege, that's what you do. At school, when we did our solfege, we actually read and played on different types of clefs. So G clef, F clef, soprano, alto, tenor, bass, and all of those different C clefs. Well, you're not going to conservatory, but then I'm just telling you that there are so many clefs that are used in music. So you have to be very happy that you're only using G clef, only one clef when you play violin. Because in piano you already play two different clefs. In viola you play an alto clef, a C clef. In soprano saxophone, of course, soprano clef, but I think at the moment now they also use this plain G clef. But then back then, when your instrument is soprano or alto and all, the clef would be same as the voice of the instrument. So if it's alto, you'll read it in alto clef and all. So now, going back to the slurring and all, there are many different ways of practicing slur again. So unless it's indicated otherwise, you can always begin in a down bow. If there's no indication that you're going to start at a down or an up bow, you can explore. Sometimes it works better if you begin with an up bow. So it's not a mistake. You have to explore the possibilities of playing in the different phrases in the music you play. So if it's plainly sight reading, normally you would just do a down bow. For example, there's the slurred notes here. Oh, wait, let me show you first the notes. So here are the notes. If you could say, so G, those are the notes. So now, I'm going to sadly put it on my left side. So once you start sight reading, you have to be mindful of your posture too. But since I don't have a music stand in front of me, I'm likely stooping down a little bit. So sight reading. Once you start playing, your eyes should always move forward. So measure one playing, eyes should be right onto the next measure. So while I'm playing this part, my eyes are already playing or reading the next measure. So it's gonna be like this. Okay, so why was I able to play the entire exercise without stopping? Is because my eyes just went forward, went forward. So as I was playing the current measure, both of my eyes are already into the second and the third measures, always moving to the right. And of course, processing everything there, the bowings, the fingering. And well, for this one, no dynamic marking, so I just stuck with I just played with the mezzo forte sound, not too loud, but not soft as well. So another way to do this is, yeah, this page 19 of the book is when you know how to combine the dynamics. This one, yeah, this is page 21 of my book. So dynamics is very important. So earlier I did not do vibratos at all, but this time for dynamic exercises for the dynamics, you might want to add a little bit to intensify the passage, especially if you're playing a louder part there. So for example. So something like that. Um, Again, vibrato, just a caution. If you're a beginner, again, I've told you this so many times, try not to practice vibrato yet. If you're a little bit on the intermediate side already, then start playing. Start practicing the vibrato. Why? So that it won't affect the intonation. Because if you're just a beginner and the fingers aren't strong enough yet, this might happen, for example, playing E on B string. Since it's not strong yet as a beginner, the moment I start moving, it changes the sounding point, the proper intonation point would change. So instead of being able to anchor it here, it might slide down or it might even slide up. So it's your responsibility to strengthen the fingertips or actually your hand before doing vibrato. Okay, so what else? The different exercises for memorizing the notes also include knowing the chromatic tones in the scale or on your strings. For example, the G string has the G, then G sharp, A, B flat. So, if you're familiar with those notes, I mean, including the accidentals written on them, then you can easily put your fingers onto that note the moment you see it. So, you might want to really work on chromatic scales. So you can also find that in subject. This is an exercise 19, if I'm not mistaken. So you should start reading the chromatic scale in that book to be familiar with how they look. And then, of course, you'll have to intone everything. When you play well, all scales. But when you play specifically the chromatic scale, it is easy for you to, well, get lost. Or what I mean is that your the intonation for each note could easily get lost, or I would say not easy to remember the moment you are doing a chromatic scale. So at first you will need the nowadays you would just put the app, the tuner app in front of you. So that is for the brain to really tell you that the what the tuner says is the right pitch. So if it says here, of course that's tuned, the G sharp here, as long as the needle's not right in the middle, then it's still not in tune. Then you have to find the intonation, the right pitch for that. Once you found it, then stick it there into your brain. So if you practice that daily and a lot of times, when they suddenly appear in your piece, then you can easily put your finger there. And your brain can already tell you right away that, hey, B flat should sound like this, or hey, A flat is like this, or B sharp, of course, there's a B sharp, or a D sharp, or an A sharp should sound like this, and this range, and all of those. But if you don't practice the chromaticism, that scale, it will not be easy when you're sight reading because pieces normally would have accidentals because it will sound so boring if it just sticks to mm, to the to the key signature. So it's very seldom that you would find, unless it's nursery rhymes or just for kids, or pieces which do not have accidentals. Not the key signature. What I mean is really the accidentals between phrases or between measures. So sometimes there are pieces that all of a sudden, hey, why is there a flat here while the key signature is all sharp? It's because the composer wants you to enjoy some different tones also. That puts excitement to a piece, or maybe it's about to change mode. That's why all of a sudden you see a lot of accidentals. And if you're not familiar with the tones there, you might get lost. You might get confused. The brain would say, hey, what is happening? Now there's a flat. A while ago, the EC is just only four sharps, and now I'm getting a B flat and all. Maybe it's going up to F major. Maybe it's about to go to one semitone mode higher, so from E going to F. Perhaps that's what's happening, so you should also know that. And again, this is part of theory, but since you're not music students, then you should only know the basics of this. So perhaps in the future, I will just focus also on teaching you theory, since there are a lot of books already for violin tutorials and for violin lessons and techniques. So you can just focus also onto the given lessons we have. You can just review them. So the most important ones were already given. I've discussed all of them. Well, I would say majority of them that you can apply from a beginner's point of view up to advanced. So the cheese is there. All you need to do is work on them. So what you need now is to be equipped as well with the theories. So you would understand how a note with accidental like this and that is needed in a piece and all. And why all of a sudden you're turning to a different mode, to a different key. Maybe because the composer wants you to know also that there are other modes that the first part could really uh, progress on, and it could be more exciting. So sometimes the composer introduces something new while you're playing a piece. Or sometimes you just also stay in that key, but then within the piece, you will find some accidentals. So maybe in the future, I will just do some theory stuff and then how chords were built and how you could actually compose or arrange music because well it will be easy if you have knowledge about the instruments you play or the instruments that you're going to include in your arrangement or composition. But if not, yeah, then you will need to have a lot of guidance. So at this point in time, if you have questions regarding how you could sight read better or what you can do to improve your sight reading, you can actually ask now. I can also say, right? Oh, sorry. So, questions? So again, you always have to be mindful of your posture when you're playing, um, when you're practicing, or whether you're performing in public or just practicing for yourself. You have to be mindful of the posture at all times and always aim for the best. The sound should always be like you're performing for everyone or in a music hall. That should always be the goal. Whenever you practice, even if it's just a simple one, even if it's just a scale, even if it's just a simple finger technique. So, yeah. Other questions? No questions yet. I'm waiting for some questions. Because if there will be no questions about, yeah, furthering your sight reading technique, then we can also just end up the session early today. So, so what's difficult sometimes is when you get stuck to a music measure. Well, I should just say measure because one note there might be very difficult to articulate, or there is something that you do not know. So it's also your responsibility to research about the different markings. For example, there's a short or a small letter V. That's not an up bow. It's not a marking for an up bow because you know that the up bow is slightly a big V. But then if it's really a small one and a little bit on the bold side, it's for example that one. It's just an accent, a shorter one, a stronger one, compared to the one that's positioned like this. This one is stronger, or that one sometimes written this way or that way, depends on the editor or the edition. So to be able to sight read, know all the different markings, Of course, know the pitches, intonation, and then rhythm. You have to be very equipped with the different rhythmic patterns, and then the right bowing technique should already be in the intermediate side. So I'm still waiting for questions. If you have any, if none, you can just say no also. So since there are no questions, I would have to end the session earlier today. So just remind yourself when you practice, you should always be fixing something. So when you practice, should be a smart practice. Don't waste time just uh, playing on over and over again, one passage and all without fixing anything at all. You should know why you're practicing a particular measure, a particular note, particular rhythm, so that you're not wasting time. Because if you do, it's a waste of your time and energy. So when you practice scales, work on the intonation and the fluidity of the session of tones. And of course, refine the movement of the right arm. So if you're working on chromatic scale, well, intonation is very important, and the way they look into the staff, into the music sheet, so that when you encounter one or two of them in your pieces, you can easily tune them. And what else? So when the fingers are not moving, when you try to sight read, it means that the fingers are still lacking for a technique. You should go back to your subject. So try to add more exercises, perhaps, so that you could really unwind those tight fingers. So, okay, so hopefully what I gave you this afternoon or tonight is clear enough. So, yeah, we'll just have to end the session, and perhaps next week we're going to have another one. Yeah, so have a great day. Thank you for tuning in. You can always review this if you missed something or if you were not here much earlier. So, bye for now.